to start this week, I want to do a brief overview of book one, assuming that many of you have read it, others of you have not and probably won't, others of you haven't and probably will. I know we kind of are all across the board. What I ask of you is to try to read it. I think you might be surprised at how easy it is to get into. Like I said, I read it in an afternoon, the entire book, not just book one, but the whole book from beginning to end, because it is captivating and intriguing once you get into it. So if book one was kind of hard for you to get into initially, don't give up. Like I said, skip a few chapters. Maybe this will pique your interest, but I want to go over a couple of things in this overview. We're going to look at some quotes that were significant, maybe in some of the characters, and I'll show you kind of how I would do a reading log as I'm going through to try to remember some of these things because you will be writing about it later. So let's jump in to book one. It begins with a kind of the journey that our main character is going to take. And he's going to be describing the landscape for quite a while of what it looks like in Nebraska, because it's a huge contrast to where he was in the East. The East has been settled at this point. There have been cities and there has been industry for generations now, but the plains are still, it's like regressing back in time. It's something that he's never seen. So if we go into it, one of the first quotes that I highlighted is, if we never arrived anywhere, it didn't matter. Between that earth and that sky, I felt erased, blotted out. I didn't say my prayers that night. Here I felt what would be would be. Why is this important? Why did I highlight this quote? Well, for one, I'm going to show you, like, here's my chart up here. So I have my characters listed and then some themes and symbols. One of the themes that I think is going to become more apparent as we read the book is just that survival versus death, which makes it kind of obvious, but there's a constant struggle in kind of unsettled territories or on the frontier. Either you become something or you are defeated. So you will either push through, becoming something, push through, become stronger, or you're defeated. I think we recognize that theme as Americans, that, I mean, we see it in sports. I would say you might recognize that most thoroughly because we don't have a lot of obstacles that are faced in our lives, but the American tendency is to say, like, I'm going to push until I can't push any longer. And either I'm going to become stronger or it's going to kill me. And that is sort of this American idealism. And so that would kind of be an ideology, or, like, in some ways we could say it's like the American dream, but survival versus death, that constant struggle. So when we go back to our quote over here, it says, between the earth and the sky, I feel erased and blotted out. The earth, nature, is such a huge and dominant force that he says, I don't even bother to say my prayers, because here it seems like, yes, it's still God's earth, but nature is so powerful that he feels like even his prayers are insignificant. And so what I might even make, and I mentioned this last week, that nature was going to become a character. Nature is so looming that even prayers aren't effective. That's another way of saying that nature is in some ways bigger than God. Now, I really kind of hate to put it that way because it's just a tongue-in-cheek comment, but it's saying it seems that way. That's how great and big the power of nature seems. All right, so let's keep going in the text. He arrives at his grandparents' farm. He talks about the contrast between his experience and Antonia's. And then I have this quote again at the end of the chapter. Um, so I kept as still as I could. He's still going to be talking about nature. He's laying kind of in the garden. The gophers are scurrying up and down, and the sheltered bottom, the wind didn't blow as hard. The earth was warm under me, and it crumbled through my fingers. Queer little bugs came out and moved in slow squadrons around me, their backs polished vermilion and black. I kept as still as I could. Nothing happened. I didn't expect anything to happen. I was something that lay under the sun and felt it like pumpkins, and I didn't want to be anything more. I was entirely happy. Perhaps we feel like that when we die and we become a part of something entire, whether it's sun and air or goodness and knowledge. At any rate, that is happiness, to be dissolved into something complete and great. And when it comes to one, it comes as naturally as sleep. Um, what does this quote mean? What would I basically characterize this as? It's as if you go and you lay in the middle of an enormous field that's been undeveloped, nothing around you that is man-made except what God has created. Here we don't really have these vast expansive prairies, but we have like the mountains. Let's say you like hiked the Pacific Crest Trail and you're up in the middle, like miles away from any highway. You lay down in the forest, you look up at all the trees around you, and all you hear is wind and possibly water, assuming that no one has gone with you. And you just wait and you have this sense of dissolving into nature. That's what he's feeling. And his comment is maybe that's what it feels like to die. Like this is happiness, to be dissolved into something complete and great. That's happiness for Jim. I know for some of us that would totally freak us out to be that alone. But what does he mean by that is happiness? What could we say about him? So to be just, oops. To be dissolved into something great, become a part of something entire. He says that is goodness, that is knowledge, that is happiness. And I will probably also put a page number here so that if I wanted to come back to it, I could. And so this is going to be on, what's page? Page 13. Okay. I guess I'll also reiterate, like, this isn't how everybody feels. Not everybody wants to be dissolved into something great and a part of something entire. It's definitely unique to Jim. He's not the type of person like Antonia that's going to conquer. He wants to become a part of. He's the type of person that nature conquers him rather than he fights it as a force. And so he's more of a passive receptacle or a passive character. He receives, and we're going to see the contrast with Antonia in just a bit. Okay, now we're into chapter 3, and there's this comment. Antonia had opinions about everything, and she was soon able to make them known. Almost every day she came running across the prairie to have her reading lesson with me. Antonia she had opinions about everything, and she was soon able to make them known. So the thing about it, she was soon able to make them known, again, is that language. Not only is nature a barrier for her, being a woman a barrier for her, and language being a barrier for her, she's going to oh my goodness, rise above each one of them. Transcend. That's the word I was looking for. So she transcends language, nature, gender, role, immigrant status, and on. So she is a character who transcends and conquers versus Jim. And let's not forget to add our page number just for reference here. I've put that on page 22. Okay. Moving right along. Chapter 5. We knew that things were hard for our Bohemian neighbors, but the two girls were light-hearted and never complained. They were always ready to forget their troubles at home and to run away with me over the prairie, scaring rabbits and starting up flocks and quail. So light-hearted, we're going to add never complained, despite like very real hardships. What page is this? 24. Page 25. Okay, moving along. He had told Antonia that in his country only rich people had cows, but here any man could have one who would take care of her. The milk was good, so he looked down at us. He saw chickens, he saw a cow. We're gonna see that some of the minor characters, which I'm not gonna put in here, but Peter is a minor character and he loves his cow. Like he treats it as if it's like the most treasured possession that he has. And we're going to learn again that in his country only rich people had cows, but here he has a cow. And the very last thing that he loses once his brother gets sick and dies is he has to leave his cow, and he has tears in his eyes and he's petting her, and it's sort of like the final symbol of wealth. So the cow becomes a symbol. How do I decide what to highlight? How do I decide what's significant? Just something that talks to me about the character, something that speaks of a symbol or something that's important. Let's look at this one. So he's basically going to be telling a story, and he speaks kindly, and Antonia is translating. My tatanik say, when you are a big boy, he give you his gun, very fine, from Bohemie. It was belonged to a great man, very rich, like what you got here, many fields, many forests, many big house. My papa play for his wedding, and he give my papa fine gun, and my papa give you. I was glad that this project was one of futility. There never were such people as the Shimerdas for wanting to give away everything that they had. And so the Antonia's father wants to, like, he talks about the lineage of this gun, and again it's this prized possession, and the Shimerdas are always just giving away everything they have, yet they almost have nothing. And so one of the themes that I would play upon is the hospitality is going to be a theme going both directions, that hospitality is not only care of and for, but it's also, there's a twinge of generosity and pride that's kind of all weaved in together in this concept of hospitality. And so I would expand upon that as I continue. But yeah, the Shimerdas are always giving everything that they own, everything that they possess, until they have nothing, and then they get a little bit stressed. The great land never looked to me so big and free. If the and he talks about the grass, and again, everything is just getting larger and larger. And he talks about this. I mean, there's a rattlesnake. So, like I said, you should go through and really highlight. Oh yeah, this is the part. Peter kisses the cow before she was led away by her new owner. I didn't see him do it, but I know this. After all his furniture and his cook stove and his pots and his pans had been hauled off, when his house was stripped and bare, he sat on the floor with his knife, and he ate all the melons they'd put away for winter. And when they drove up on their wagon to take Peter to the train, they found him with a dripping beard, surrounded by heaps of melon rinds. And so it's just sad, like the haves and the have-nots, and Peter and Pavlov are examples of characters who don't make it in this harsh, hard reality. So we're gonna look at, I mean, again, there's this just richness of just, I mean, throughout description. There was a look of weariness and pleasure, like that of sick people when they feel relief from pain. Grandmother insisted on his drinking a glass of Virginia apple brandy after his long walk in the cold, and when a faint flush came in his cheeks, his features might have been cut out of a shell. They were so transparent. He said almost nothing, and he smiled rarely, but as he rested, there we all had a sense of his utter contentment. So I'll pick up in the next video.